another podcast with Dan John, and we're going to have these back up on YouTube now. Dan, can you hear me? Sorry, I think I had a little audio hiccup.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Off to a great start, technology. Love it. But we're trying the video format again. So if you're listening and you want to see Dan's beautiful complexion, which indeed it is, you can head over to YouTube and check that out. And yeah, so how's the past week been for you, Dan? What's been on the training?
Well, I have an injury, but it's not what you think. So last Wednesday, they're doing construction around my house. So Lacey and I were doing a complex followed by about a 400 meter heavy hands, complex 400 meter heavy hands, complex. Well, we're coming around the corner here, and one of the construction guys who I know says, "Hey, Dan," and I stepped in mud, and both feet went up about 4 feet, and I landed on my right elbow.
Oh, no.
I didn't break anything because, I know how to fall and all that, but it's physics, baby. It's physics. And all my weight landed on that right elbow, and that's good. You want to land on, if you're going to choose, you want to break bones. You don't want to break joints. There's a bit of advice for you, gentle listener.
There you go. Yeah, I love it.
But it's coming around. Okay, it's weird. I had to go get a little physical therapy on it, but it's just, when you hit a bone that hard, you just kind of mess with stuff. But it's all good. I've had to cut back on a few things, but I figure by the end of this week I'll be back to being my normal, whatever I am self.
Yeah. Well, we're very sorry to hear that, Dan. That's always unfortunate, but it will teach you to go walking around outside.
Yes. The upside is, as always, if this happened with the wrist surgeries, the hip replacement, it got me thinking, and that's always good. And I have been inspired. I've been taking this idea. Okay, first you and I talked about doing complexes followed by the long walk, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then I started thinking, well, what's wrong with easy strength followed by the long walk? And now I'm actually thinking, well, I don't want anyone to steal the idea. Patent pending, Pat Flynn pending, okay?
Yeah.
Isometrics followed by the long ruck. Because if what we're truly trying to do in the weight room is stimulate the nervous system, and then we're going to try to, I can see the fallacy in my thinking, but my idea is if you did an isometric, a series of, 5, maybe that's a lot, 3 to 5 isometrics. That old term we used to use a lot, iridation, where you call on all the supporting muscles to get into. If you did that, but here's the fallacy, folks. Let me already get to it. Is that what the intense exercise does? Is it releases free fatty acids. And then the idea, if this is true or not, is that when you go for that walk or that ruck or that heavy hands or that bike ride or swim or whatever, is that's the energy that your body uses to do that 45 to an hour walk. So you're eating your free fatty acids as you go. Mm-hmm. The intense releases them. The long walk sucks them up. Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, and I think that there could be some truth in that, but so that's the fallacy of doing the isometrics, because are you releasing the free fatty acids? And that would be the thing that I'm working on. So
I appreciate that, because I think there's a good lesson here, and that is we have our sort of core principles, right? The principles we know these are good principles. They're unchanging. They're immutable. They're eternal, etc. But there's a lot of ambiguity of optimization and specifics. How best can we apply these? And in there's a lot of room for both research and self-experimentation. I think that's the balance that often is missed, right? Like, we know through just the centuries of weight training and strength training and just what people have doing, like, we have a good grasp on what works generally. Yes. And also what has come up through, strength and conditioning science and nutritional science. But there's also a lot that we don't know. And there's also, you know, a lot of opportunity for further research and experimentation. So there's kind of like these bounds of, might even want to just call it like the bounds of orthodoxy, right? Like as long as you stay in these bounds, you're good, right? Like if you start going out of bounds, then it's like, okay, now you're in exercise heresy land. Like this is dangerous, right? This is obviously stupid. But within those bounds, there's tons of room for debate, experimentation, research. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is like, okay, we know these principles are good. We're within the bounds of reasonableness, right? But there might be something here that's worth looking at. Do you think that's a fair way of?
Yeah. Well, and see what's nice about having the experience I have, Pat, and I'm with you 100%, is that back in the 90s when I was coaching at that very academic high school, I told my athletes 1 hour a day, because they had to do homework. They had other things to do. They're all professors now and lawyers and stuff like that. And by the way, they're very good throwers too. But we would use, in the 1 hour workout, we used to do a lot of 3 sets of two exercises for 3 sets of 8. Mm-hmm. So it could be, you would do the front squat, 3 sets of 8 with a minute rest with the relatively lightweight. And then the overhead squat, 3 sets of 8 with a challenging weight for the overhead squat. By the way, it could be the same exact weight. Mm-hmm. And then we do some kind of abdominal work, either Saxon side bends, or we had this, a chiropractor gave us this nice little exercise that we'd all recognize as the Stu McGill curl up now. Basically, it's the same ideas. And then for the next 50 minutes, we would do our drills, our farmer walks, our discus throwing into the wall, the reps, and be done in an hour. And what began, and as I'm looking back at my body composition at the time with those 1 hour training sessions, and I'm thinking, yeah, I look good. And so now it's 2020, nearly, what? Oh my God. Am I about to say 30 years later? 25, 30 years later, and I'm cycling back. So what's good about I have to make one more point at the end of this, Pat. But what's good about this is that my experience informed me before that this kind of thing is good, with some of the stuff, but talking with you, reading a whole bunch of more stuff, listening to a whole lot of smart people, getting a grasp on things like why coffee, why coffee helps. Suppose, as I understand it, it stimulates free fatty acids. Okay, cheers. But my job now is to take care of those free fatty acids by doing something physical. And what I'm beginning to notice is I'm starting to link things together. There is a knock, and I've heard it at workshops. People make a joke about my lack of science, and it really does bother me, because then the person later on at dinner will talk about Sheridan's laws, and I'll say, Sir Charles Sheridan, the Nobel Prize winner, and I'll follow up with, which of his laws are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And because there's 2, and neither of them really supports what the person just said. I do know the science, I know it okay, but at the same time, I'm also, I'm about to say humble enough, which is a phrase rarely used with me, but I'm humble enough to know that I don't have a systematic approach to science. I pick and choose, I use science like a buffet. I pick and choose what I want and what I need, which, by the way.
Well, not only that, but I think it's important because people say like the science, well, like, what are we talking about? Right. Because there's different sciences. And particle physics is a far cry away from exercise science or epidemiology, for example. Like the methodologies are different. The predictive success is way different. The amount we can quantify and mathematize is way different. So there's just like, we have to be clear about what we're even talking about when we start talking about the science, right? Well, that's a very large umbrella.
There's a nice,
right? And some sciences these days are certainly closer to astrology than astrophysics as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, astrology will raise its head again. Trust me. But I just read a funny summary. The guy was it's an article in a popular online magazine where they talked about this thing, resistance training, RT, versus just whatever we want to call cardio this week. Okay, mm-hmm. CV. And what they did is they broke down all these participants into groups, resistance training only, cardio only, and a mix. Total number of participants was 12. 12 participants, which means you had 4 people lifting weights, 4 people doing cardio, and 4 people doing a mix. And I'm like, how can you say that that's going to, compared to the 7 billion people on this planet, I think you're like you just said, I mean, if I sat 4 random people down in a room and let them talk for a couple hours, they would find things, the Kevin Bacon thing,
right.
The 7 steps from Kevin Bacon. They would, it turns out that the woman over at Landmark Grill where I eat breakfast, we're cousins. Did you know that we're cousins? Because my in-laws are related to her in-laws, so now we joke and call each other cousin. Mm-hmm. When you only have 4 people in a room, there's going to be things that sneak up. There's going to be little weeds that sneak up, and you'll say, "Look at these." That means, and that's the problem I think with modern exercise science. Right. They have 12 participants do 3 different things, and then try to summarize something from it, and it's just not big enough. Go to an elite track and field program, and then try that, and then throw that out to the group. 100 athletes in a room and say, instantly you would be imploded because no one would accept what you just said because everyone would be raising their hand. How does that relate? I'm a steeplechaser. I'm a pole vaulter. That doesn't. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I don't even.
Well, no, it's important for people to have realistic expectations about this, and there's a lot of really good research done. But as somebody who spent a lot of time, kind of sifting through it, it's hard work. It's hard work to evaluate a lot of this research, and hopefully, people have a network of experts to say, hey, I saw this study that came out. What does this really tell us? First off, right? How was this? Did we control the right things? And we know that human beings are notoriously difficult to study. Once you bring in the human element, whether it's in exercise science or my background, my undergrad economics, right? Some of my friends I graduated get mad at me because I refuse to call economics anything of a hard science. It just isn't, right? We have our mathematical models that frequently fail. There's black swans all the time, right? And it's not that economics isn't useful at all. I'm not saying that, right? I wouldn't major in something if I thought it was, right? If it was completely useless. But
coaching is the best degree.
What's that?
For coaching, it's the best degree.
Well, it's interesting because, and there's different, and what people don't understand is there's different economic schools, right? So you have Keynesian schools of thought, you have Chicago schools of thought, you have Austrian schools of thought, and they're all working with the same data, and they're all coming to often wildly different conclusions, right? And you see the same things in other sciences where quantum mechanics is another one. Now you have to be careful because, as Feynman said, like once somebody starts talking about quantum mechanics, like they know what they're talking about, you can be sure they don't know what they're talking about, right? Yeah. But even in quantum mechanics, you have somewhere around like 10 or 11 different interpretations that are all empirically equivalent, right? It's all the same data. It all makes the same predictions, right? But with wildly different worldview implications of this, right? So, it's my pet peeve, Dan. That's why you brought this up as my pet peeve. When people just say the science, as if that means anything, that itself is like the Feynman quote. You just demonstrated that you have no idea what you're talking about, the complexity of these issues. So I'm with you. Don't ever say that. It's just annoying.
And the real key to being a good scientist is accept the fact that not only you might be wrong, you probably are going to be wrong. And I think that's okay. We still don't totally understand mitochondria, and we probably never really will. It's what they told us at the Olympic Training Center. If your brain was simple enough to understand it, you'd be so simple you wouldn't care. Mm-hmm. And I thought, it's like what I'm talking about with me, with my 3rd grade approach to free fatty acid. I understand free fatty acid just enough to see how I can make it work in a training environment.
This goes back to what we talked about before, is there's the difference between knowing that and knowing how, right? Like we can know that something works without always knowing how something works. And there's a lot of examples like this, especially at exercise science. Like we know if we have people do certain things typically tend to happen. But there's great debate on what the actual, biomechanical mechanisms are on these things. Fasting is a good example. We know that fasting reliably produces certain outcomes with other certain controls in place, but there's great debate of like, well, how does it do that, right? Or why?
My thought is, especially when it comes to fat loss, the fact that you're not consuming calories makes you consume less calories.
Yeah, how about that?
Which is what that down. That should be on my gravestone. Okay, these the kind of gems that.
Right, and that's one of the important things in kind of the whole debate with calories too. Is like, yes, calories obviously matter, and fasting is one way to help control calories. But there's also a lot of reason to think that there's more to the equation than just, measurements of energy, right? Like, and part of it is behavioral. Like we know that people tend to consume more calories when foods are hyper palatable, for example, right?
Yeah. And designed to be hyper palatable.
Yeah. So like we need to, like, again, trying to be we've said this before, simple is good, simplistic is bad. Yes, calories matter, but there's more to it, right? Like, well, why are people with these eating patterns eating more calories, right? And there's so many different variables.
Would you make that the title this week's?
What's that? Simple but not simplistic?
Yeah, I think that's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. There's a kind of training called fasted cardio. And I was at a workshop one time and someone kind of pontificated that, I'll tell you one thing, in 6 months will be no different between fasted and unfasted. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So folks, just listen more about it. But Marty Gallagher has been recently writing a series of articles on fasted cardio. It's interesting. This is completely unscientific what I'm about to say. But the fact that Marty Gallagher writes that fasted cardio has value because he's Marty Gallagher, fasted cardio slides up into my head as more important again. Now that is as unscientific, and that is what is it? It's the opposite of an ad hominem argument. It is a pro hominem argument. But I guess what I'm trying to say, Patrick, is that sometimes the person who tells me something is just as important as this research that they're doing at some tiny college in the middle of nowhere, America.
Right. Well, they say it's an appeal to authority, and people say that's a fallacy. But when it comes to, I'm doing a whole series on fallacies. When it comes to material or informal fallacies, context is relevant, right? Context. So not every appeal to authority is immediately a fallacy, especially if they are a relevant authority on a subject. Now, you can't. Now, if there's a contention or an argument against it, you need some type of symmetry breaker to decide it. So you can't just rely. Yeah. But if we didn't rely on authorities at all, we would know absolutely nothing, right? We would know nothing. Like, how do I know that I was born on October 24th in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, right? I don't have videotape of it. I just take it on the authority of my parents.
If you read I have that workshop online called the epistemology one. Mm-hmm. I think that 80% of the information I do is based on two things. One is authorities, and the other one is what I call deductive logic. What are the best and brightest in this field doing? So if Coach Mon tells you to do this, Dick Notmeyer says to do this, that's my first layer. Okay, I got to do this. Mm-hmm. And then I sit back and go, well, what are the world record holders all doing? Well, they do this same thing too. Mm-hmm. That's good enough for me. Having said that, there's still, I think, that 20% ish that phenomenology and what I would call real science. So real science, good science, should inform me that what Coach Mon said and what the world record holder does is right. Mm-hmm. And if there's a better way to do it, real science should be able to help, like Dick Fosbury's Fosbury flop high jump technique.
Yeah.
Even though it was and then phenomenology is when you and I have these weekly conversations. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've noticed is that after we talk every week, very often I'll go back in and I'll tweak, like our little discussion a few weeks ago about if I woke up fat. Mm-hmm. Well, if I woke up fat is the original tweak to what I'm doing into the mind where I'm going down now. Mm-hmm. To now I'm even wondering what if you did isometrics followed by a walk? And then I'm thinking, what if you didn't even need equipment? So you do, you use the wall and the door frame for your eyes. You see where my head's going? Mm-hmm. One of my jobs, I think, Pat, is to go so deep into better and better and better that I'm clearly wrong. Mm. And then my job is to pull myself back out of that hole to go where, okay, I was right on, and then I went too far. But it's my job it's my job to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Mm-hmm. Where I'm going to tell your audience, folks, all you need is just to push your hands together, pull your hands apart, push your knees into your hands, pull your knees into your hands, and then go for a 45-minute walk, mm-hmm. and all your dreams come true. Well, that's not.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you just put a conditional on it, where you just say, hey, here's a hypothesis I have. I think this is worth testing. It seems like there might be plausibility to that. Oh, turns out I was wrong. Great. That's the scientific method, right? Maybe not in exactly the same way that all sciences work, but it's going by hypothesis testing. Like I have plausible grounds to think that this might be a plausible thing, and I'm going to try it out, right? And if it works, awesome. We've increased our knowledge. If it doesn't work, awesome. We've still increased our knowledge. So either way, we're better off. You know, who's really good on this, somebody that, especially on the epistemology question, is John Henry Newman, right? His Grammar of Assent, where he says, well, when do we typically come to assent on things? And he says, well, it's usually through not any one thing, but a series of converging and convincing arguments. You have a piece of testimony here, you have an authority there, you have empirical research here, you have philosophical arguments there that all tend to converge upon some type of consisting theme till finally say, yeah, that seems true. That seems right.
That seems true. Mm-hmm. William O'Malley, the great theologian and catechist, said basically the same darn thing. Mm-hmm. He said that, there's a series of things that this seems, over in my life, I have found that being kind is, especially since the fact that it's pretty obvious when you meet me, I can rip your arms off, but being kind tends to be one of the best things, saying please and saying thank you. Over and over and over. Kindness, thank you, please, have opened more doors for me than my feet and baseball bats.
Amen to that. Mm-hmm.
And so I think you're right. And so what we're saying is that you sit around one day, and I'm kind of lucky. I mean, I'm at a nice age where I have enough experience, and I've seen enough people do things wrong. I could talk for hours.
Yeah, and chances are you don't have any longitudinal study on this. Right? It's just, no, I've lived for a long time, and I've seen this play out. I've lived it myself. Same thing. I mean, you read like the classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is one of his main points. And it's like, I'm not like super critical of that book because he doesn't have a bunch of studies referenced. But everybody knows like what he talks about in this book is true. It's true, right? It definitely works.
Well, I remember the first time I was introduced to that book it's funny to think this. It was the discus thrower, John Powell, who's become my friend now. And in an article in Track and Field News, he said that the first thing, I think Carnegie, is it Dale Carnegie or Dale Carnegie?
I've heard it both ways. I say Dale Carnegie.
Okay, so what's first? Health. Because if you don't have health, you don't have to worry about all these other things. And I thought, I'm probably, 18, 19. I thought, remember that, Danny. Because, you can have, people, I'm at a place in my career financially where I get offered these things and offered to do these things or offered to sell this stuff. And it's like, but the money's great. I got no issue with that. But my number one concern is dancing at Josephine's wedding. Oddly, one quick small thing. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of my daughter's wedding.
Happy anniversary. That's just
happy anniversary. Nice. And last night, Lindsay's funny. She said, well, you have to stick around to coach my kids. And I thought, thank you. Because that gives me one more. I tell you one thing, Patrick, and I don't want to put any pressure on this future child, but Thomas is about 6'5", and Lindsay she's just a fast twitch monster. And if this child gets Thomas's levers, Lindsay's fast twitch and attitude,
unstoppable.
I might have my next national champion. I'm looking
Yeah, maybe even Olympian. Who knows?
Well, let's. I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid. Let's just say national champion, and we'll
Yeah. Hey, it helps to pick the right parents, as we know. But one more point about this, because I don't want anyone to think that we're bashing science. I love science. Dan loves science, right? But we're trying to gain conceptual clarity here and epistemological clarity. How do we know what we know? And we can see that, like, if you're just going to restrict yourself to what's become known as scientism, or somebody will say, well, you should only believe what science tells you, you're immediately going to defeat yourself, because there's nothing in science that tells you that you should only believe what science tells you, right? That's a philosophical commitment. Yeah. So you just want to realize that epistemology, how we come to a reasonable and responsible assent, is a really important question. It's a question that philosophers have always grappled with. And that's why I'm very attracted to John Henry Newman. Because he's responding to like John Locke and people who are starting to restrict epistemology too much. And his seems right to me. It's like, yes, no, that's the model, right? And there's details to fill in, but something like the series of the converging and convincing arguments. We don't want to rely on just one-off anecdotes. That's certainly not true, but anecdotes are worth something. Reliable testimony, expert witness, empirical research, philosophical arguments, all of it converging and convincing, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, every good coach I've ever had was a storyteller. Now, I think that good coaches can use a story as a lever to nudge you in the right direction. Like Dick Nottmeyer famously, I had a kid like you. That was always well, you can do that, but here's what happened to little Patrick Flynn, or whatever. Or little Danny John, he had a cheap pair of shoes on and fell on the ground, hurt his elbow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just an important coaching tool, right? It's like, we know, logic and rhetoric. Like, it's one thing, unfortunately, people don't always respond to good arguments. They just don't, right? So, but if as coaches, and we really want to help people, then, okay, well, what else do we have in our tool? Well, storytelling. We know it's one of those things, right, where we just know through experience, stories tend to affect more people than abstract arguments, right? I don't need a study to confirm that. Like, we just know that it's true. And if we can put things into well-crafted stories, and we can reach people both in their heads and their hearts, we'll probably have a better impact. So I'm with you, Dan. I think learning to be a good storyteller, especially when it comes to things you care about, is a valuable skill for coaching.
Officially, that when I went to the Middle East, one of the things I did was study religious education systems there, and all it did was reaffirm the tradition I learned, that it's 4 parts. Tell a story, show a picture, ask questions, and then memorize the words of something. It could be, obviously, in religious education, it would be a prayer. Mm-hmm. But if you're studying government, it would be "We the people," those. And I tell you one thing: you learn those songs as a kid, and that becomes the framework of what you know. After 9/11. Home of the free and land of the brave became much more important than that song ever thought. And because that really hit people on the heart finally. 9/11, and for those who are non-American listeners, it's our anthem, but it really became much more real. Everybody knew the words to that song, but it was the moment that made the song real. I really did. Folks, and I try real hard in my work to do that, which is why I always have those stupid charts and graphs and images, because I feel that that's how you teach.
But it's stuck with people. I mean, everybody knows, who's been following you for more than 5 minutes, like Dan John's quadrants, for example, right? It's the images and the charts and graphs that really make an impact with people.
The movement matrix, Sister Maria Sumta's compass, in fact, to the point now that we're just going to put those online permanently so people can just reference them when I talk, because I'm always going to go back to show a picture. I'm going to tell a story, show a picture. The ask question things bounces back and forth, and then try to memorize something: push, pull, hang, squat, load, carry.
Right. Perfect. So that was really fascinating talk. What's the overall point of that? We just went in every direction. Epistemology matters. Science is good, but there's other ways of figuring stuff out.
Let me trace the conversation back. Dan, how you doing? I slipped and fell and hurt my bobo. I hurt my bobo.
I got a boo-boo on my bobo.
I got a boo-boo on my bobo. And because of that, it made me rethink about this idea of mixing complexes followed by long walks to easy strength followed by long walks. And then I went down as deep as I could into the rabbit hole where you don't even need exercise equipment at all. You're going to do 1964 office desk isometrics and go for a walk and all your dreams come true. And I said to myself, well, that it sounds good. That's not going to work though. And then I pulled myself out, and that's where the conversation got.
Yeah. But that's, I hope, that's what I love about these conversations, right? And I hope people see that. And we've talked about this before. Oftentimes people only see the finished product, right? They only see the finished music record. They only see the finished book. They don't see how the sausage is being made. And anybody who's ever published anything, made an exercise program, book, I don't know, movie, right? There's always those rough drafts. You have to think through things. You have to make mistakes. You have to make a mess. And I guess we're just showing people a little bit of that mess right now, right?
Well, I have journals that go back to 1971, and I would be honored if someone would go through them and then step up to me and say, what the hell were you thinking? Which years? Oh, about every 2 months, you just go off. Yeah, yeah, if I'd have had the perfect program, I wouldn't have stuck to that either.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
good stuff.
Gentle listener, that is something I try to emphasize all the time. People are always trying to make tried and trusted things better. And my point always is do Mass Made Simple, do all 6 weeks, finish it, take a week and then email me with a better way to do it. Mm-hmm. Don't look at it online or look at your friend's book and say, well, here's what I would do. No, do what's tried and true and proven.
Yes.
And then make it better.
That, Dan, is the difference between a virtuoso and a hack, right? The hack is a person who always tries to innovate before they've even got the basics down, right? That's the hack. And then they'll often say, oh, well, I don't need standards. I'm avant-garde. I don't need to practice. No, you're just a hack, right? The virtuoso is somebody who masters the fundamentals, masters the basics, and then innovates, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, innovation is a tough thing without a lot of experience, I think. Mm-hmm. Well, good. Let's answer questions.
Take us some questions. Yeah. Well, thank you for entertaining that conversation, Dan. That was a lot of fun. So. The first one comes from gentle listener Mihailo, and Mihailo asks, I'm interested to hear your opinion about working out with asymmetrically loaded double kettlebells as an alternative to working out with pairs. So 2 different size kettlebells. Dan, what are your thoughts on?
Big fan. I love it. Mm-hmm. It's funny. The same questions keep showing up everywhere now. Mihailo. It's interesting, Mihailo. When you said that, I thought you'd ask this on my other podcast. But
I imagine at this point we've got listeners who tune into both. Mm-hmm.
So I discovered years ago, in fact, I talk about it on my other podcast. So his name was Lane Cannon. I coached Lane in high school, and then we became friends. We lifted weights together, and then he went off to play college football for 4 years. And then when he came back, I didn't see him for a few years. And then I don't even remember how it happened, but we met each other. We started lifting weights again. But Lane, by the way, he tragically died the day after a shoulder surgery. Folks, when they say that you can die from surgeries, that you can. God bless the kid. And but he would go to garage sales, or he'd pick up, if you had. So we had weird weights. So he had a 110-pound dumbbell and a 60, and nothing in between. And he was experimenting with these ideas of doing, bench press and military press with asymmetrical loads. Well, I started doing them with him. So, you do them one-handed. In fact, that's where I got the one-arm bench press from, was from Lane. And then asymmetrical. And the interesting thing is, and then you'd switch, after every set, you switch over, is I think, in a very strange way, it's superior to symmetrical is. And because you're constantly anacondaing these damn things. So on the 60-pound side, when you're doing the bench press, that thing's sliding up and down. Mm-hmm. But the 110 one has a mind of its own. It doesn't want to go up and down.
Yep.
And so your body is trying to figure out constantly. So you will feel how the bench press, and this is just the first example, but you feel that the bench press works from your calves all the way up through your arms.
There's this twisting tension through your entire body. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that's when I discovered why one-arm bench presses are so important for throwers. Because as that weight descends, if you believe Meyer's slings, you can feel the slings happening. Mm-hmm. You can feel, if it's in my left hand, you can feel the toes in your right foot trying to figure out how to help. So yeah, and then on the overhead work, you'll find some real interesting, as you fight the load, all your anti-rotation muscles are going to kick in. So Mihailo, yeah, I'm a big fan of him. And by the way, if you have two different size kettlebells and you do double kettlebell front squats, maybe a 16 in one hand and a 32 in the other.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You will see how much core work happens without you even having to think of the word core work. Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for me, it's a both and. Work them in for sure. Okay. Very cool. All right, next one comes from gentle listener Karen. She says, "What do you eat after a workout? I heard you should eat within 30 minutes of working out, but never sure if it should be carbs, protein, etc."
You take that first pack because I know you have strong theories about this.
Yeah, I got my theories. All right. Yeah, generally I think it's good to replenish after a workout. I think some people, again, like here's where the research becomes relevant. Is there like a huge thing that we find in the research if you eat within a certain amount of time? No, not really. Honestly, there isn't. As long as you're getting in enough protein generally and enough calories generally, that's what makes the biggest difference. That you're doing it is more important than when you're doing it. With nutrition in general, that you're doing it is more important than. But there's a caveat. Sometimes when you do it can affect that you do it, right? So psychologically, so things do come back around. So I just like to give a general, recommendation. If you can get in some quality protein and maybe some quality carbs as well, 30 to 60 minutes without working out, I'm happy with that. And I don't think it needs to be much more complicated than that, honestly. Yeah.
I was lucky, so there's a guy named Tom Fahey. He's a discus thrower. If you take exercise phys at a university, you read his book. And he was also the editor of Muscular Development for a long time. And he's also a good friend of mine because we're both throwers. Good friend. He's a good, very smart man. And he told me one time, there's really only three things that work. And one of the things he said was protein before you work out. And I go, really? He goes, yeah, for a big guy like you, it might be 20 grams. And I thought, wait, 20? Yeah, most people need about 10. Pat, I don't know my grams of protein as well as I should, but is that like a hard-boiled egg?
I think ish, like 10. Hard-boiled egg is probably around 10, maybe a little bit less. It's been a while since I've checked up on the macros of a hard-boiled egg. Yeah.
So so he said, try it. Try eating a can of tuna fish before workouts. Now that was not a good plan because tuna fish and Olympic lifting don't dance well together. But for me, I'm now to the point that most of the people I'm talking to are dealing with the BMI issues, body mass index, body composition issues. Their waistlines are too big. So Karen, for the people I work with, I even tell them now, do your complexes, do your walk, get in, and continue kind of living a little bit before you ingest that first meal. Mm-hmm. But we're working with not elite throwers, not elite athletes here, but with people who want to lose some body fat, which is the most difficult thing I think the human body can do. So again, this is one of those great answers, Karen, where yes, it is important, but so what we're looking at is a whole continuum here. If you're a body comp client, it might be valuable to push it off a little bit longer. after a workout, if you're an athlete and your job is to come back better tomorrow, I definitely think you should be consuming protein. You say within 30 minutes. No, yours is 30 minutes upon waking up, right, Pat?
Yeah. Well, and again, let me clarify. It always depends, like what is good depends on, it's a functional concept. What is the goal? So if you're, like you said, if you're a performance athlete or you're trying to gain muscle and strength, then yeah, I'm going to give you protein and carbs after a workout most of the time. If you're a body comp client and you're trying to lose weight, then I might just do what you said. I might just continue a fast for a while, or I might just give protein, but not carbs, not because carbs are evil or I'm afraid of it, but because we're focusing on overall protein consumption and calorie control. And we know, again, in the research, but also through experience, that protein is one of those hinge points. When you push protein up, good things happen for body composition. We see that always. So getting the protein up, but making sure that we're still controlling calories. So there's always going to be some kind of, probably some macronutrient trade-off. So there's a range of good possible solutions here, but it always depends on what you're going for.
Right. When I work with the military guys, with the groups I work with, I always tell them protein and carbohydrate after a workout as soon as you can. Mm-hmm. Because we're also working with sleep deprivation. We're also working with, leeches and parasites. And, I got a good friend who got blown up by a grenade. That's a much different, that's a lot different than little chubby Tommy who's trying to get his bench press up to 200. Yeah.
Right.
So, Karen, it's a great question, but just make sure you kind of step back and think about what you want. But I would say, like Pat, if worst comes to worst, protein, finish the workout and pop down that hard-boiled egg. That would not be terrible.
And that's why I like controlled fasting with people a lot. And here's kind of the that and when. So yeah, fasting can be a great way to reduce calories for a lot of people, and it works. And there seems to be special benefits to fasting in and of itself, aside from caloric control. However, for some people, if you fast for a long time, they get what's known as, everyone's familiar with this, hangry, right? And then they make a bunch of poor eating decisions. So that's where the when can affect the that. And what is the solution to that? Well, it's really dependent on the individual, right? And the coach needs to be able to assess and say, hey, yeah, you're up for this. We can do a fast. You seem to do well with this, or maybe not. And then we need to modify the fast. Maybe we need to incorporate some protein shakes early on to control hunger, to get those numbers up. Or maybe we need to shorten the fasting window. And all of these are so context and individual dependent that it's hard to give a general answer. But hopefully we've given some, some ways of just thinking about it.
And Karen, I'm just, Karen, if you're like, if you are a mom with little kids around the house and you work out, to deal with hangry, it might be for the welfare of your home environment to protein and carb after, just so that, you can, we've all, anyone who's ever raised children knows that you don't want mommy or daddy hangry.
Ooh, no, you do not. No, you do not. But it's a good, it is good, I think. And this is why part of the reason I love fasting is it's like weight training, in a sense that you can train yourself to develop in fortitude and temperance. You can train yourself to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's an important mental skill, if nothing else, but you have to do it with the awareness of that being one of the goals.
It's my one great single regret of my career is I did not put my arms. Of course, we didn't. I don't want to say we didn't know. We just didn't know. I think fasting would have been a huge helper in my athletic career.
Yeah. Great. Okay, next one comes from gentle listener Dwayne. He says, "Hi guys. First, thank you for all you for. Let me try that again. First, thank you for all you do for the fitness and theological communities. I really enjoy your weekly podcast. It is on my must-listen list each week. Regarding my question, I have two, if I may. How can I help my 76-year-old father and 20-year-old son with their general physical fitness? Of the two, my dad may be easier, as he might actually listen. My dad is in pretty good shape for his age and loves the outdoors. He's been trying to get into, quote, going to the gym the past few years, but doesn't really know what to do there. Now with COVID, his gym is shut. So I'm thinking this might be a great time to blend his love of outdoors with fitness, using kettlebells and bodyweight exercises and perhaps TRX. What do you think? What would be appropriate? Then for my son, he tends to fall into the camp of thinking he must follow a split body routine and use every possible exercise for that body part each trip to the gym. He had just begun the Mad Cow 5x5 program prior to COVID, which I viewed as positive, but that's now 3 months out the window. What would you suggest to get him back on track with a solid foundation? Your guidance will likely be better received than anything from old dad. We know how that goes. As background on me, I'm 50 years old, no athletic background, but I'm reasonably fit, jogging 25 miles per week and training with kettlebells and body weight, push-ups and pull-ups 3 times per week with occasional rucks thrown in. Thank you again for all you do. Your gentle listener, Dwayne.
Well, we know that the research for your father is actually pretty good. The amount he needs in the weight room to, well, that one study was, if I remember this correctly, it was only 3 exercises: leg extension, it was a press. I can't remember if it was a machine bench press or a machine military, but it doesn't matter. And then a lat pull down. So 3 exercises, 3 sets of 10, and they made massive inroad changes in hormonal profiles and lean body mass. Folks, that's not very much. 3 exercises, 3 sets of 10. So with your father, Dwayne, I think that if we can get him to do, since he's an outdoor enthusiast, I mean, I'm not saying we should ignore the legs, but if we can get him to do some kind of press, you said you had suspension trainers, some kind of row or T's or Y's, any of those standard suspension movements, doesn't have to be a lot. And the only thing I would suggest is that maybe if you could get him to goblet squat just for the movement, it doesn't have to be 3 sets of 10, and then some kind of, if you could teach the hinge. But in the beginning, a push, the TRX work, the suspension trainer work, the goblet squat practice, and then slowly introduce the hinge family, and then get outside and go do your thing. Mm-hmm. We'll start with the father, and we'll move to the son. But go ahead, Patrick.
No, I think that's brilliant. Just would echo everything you said. You know, getting that strength and hypertrophy work in. We know trying to retain lean muscle tissue as we get older is again one of those things where you can. There's always a million things you could focus on, but there's some things that are really worth focusing on. And the resistance training for preserving lean muscle tissue seems to be especially important as we age. So Dan just gave the prescription for that. I just want to echo its usefulness. Mm-hmm.
It's stealing. And you don't have to get too fancy. It doesn't, and he might even push back a little bit and say, well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. But it's let's do this first. I would suggest, if you can, to maybe start with standing presses, and then over time get him to the half kneeling, mm-hmm. just because I like adults on the floor a little bit more. But and the suspension trainer is like stealing with folks. It is. You know, I thought they were stupid when they first came out, but that'll just show my own arrogance and sports focus. But there's magic there. Yeah,
but also that you're willing to change your mind when new evidence emerges, right? Which is, look, I've done that a million times where I feel like, oh, that's going to be a waste, or that's going to be stupid, and now I'm a huge fan, right?
And then for the son, he's stuck right now, so you might as well. If I tell you one thing, with your equipment you have, you might not be able to do much, but boy, I'd love to see him push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry every workout. And it seems like you have the equipment to pull that off. If he's interested in hypertrophy, we still know that around 25 reps is the best you can do. That's that 5 sets of 5 stuff. But with your limited amount of load in your place, you might want to think more like Wendler's 5 sets of 10 in his bigger but boring program. But I tell you one thing, 5 sets of 10 in a push, a pull, a hinge, and a squat. Good luck on that.
Yeah, but you know what? If you're going to do the high volume stuff, do it when you're young, right? Getting that, get it in the bank early, right? Because it pays dividends. Mm-hmm.
if you get a chance, look up Jim Wendler 531 bigger but boring. We did with in fact, this is the root of my book called Mass Made Simple. We were doing Wendler's bigger but boring, and then I added complexes to it, and that's when my athletes first started telling me. They would come home and their parents would say, "What are you guys doing there?" And then the firefighters started picking up the programs because their sons were in my class, and then I slowly took two programs. I took the complexes. I simplified a few things and then did the high rep squats, and that became Mass Made Simple. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if you can do it, I mean, Mass Made Simple is a great program. Right. And if you go to Dan John University, we have in the resources Lean Made Simple, and my good friend Lonnie Wade just finished it and had real good results. So there's plenty of things the 20-year-old can do. There's tons of things. It's up to, and the nice thing is, if you could go 3 generations at once, that would be a beautiful thing.
That'd be very cool. That would be very cool.
That'd be very cool.
Yeah, just stay 20. Don't turn 30.
Yeah, don't age. You'll be happy.
Very good. Okay, got time for 1 or 2 more here, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. This one comes from gentle listener Steve. Steve says he's an endurance cyclist, and as an endurance cyclist, 100 plus miles a week, January to September, what is a good strength maintenance program I can follow during these months without negatively impacting cycling periodized training?
Yeah, I can only tell you this. I've got a good friend. His name is James. His website is bikejames.com. And then on Instagram, I think he's MTBS or something like that. Don't write that down. I want you to look up bikejames.com. James uses things like the windmill stick, swings, Turkish get-ups, goblet squats. He has an isometric program that I tried. It's very good. But if you don't mind, Pat, I'm going to send him somebody who knows what they're talking about. Is that okay?
Yep. That would be great. We can link that in the show notes if you just send me his website or contact. Yeah, we're always happy to. Always happy to refer out to the relevant.
Let me just make sure I got that right, okay? For those who are not watching, I'm doing a thing called typing on something called the internet.
The Googler.
The Google, and it's nothing's good. We'll have to give it another moment. But, yep, it's MTB Strength Training Systems. Folks, it's just bikejames.com, okay?
There you go.
And you get training programs. And be sure, Steve, you tell them I sent you, okay?
It pays to be a friend of Dan's, trust me.
Pays to be a friend of mine.
It really does. I'm totally serious about that. Become Dan's friend. I mean, just for pure utility. Forget the virtuous friendship. Just make it a utilitarian thing. Yeah.
My daughter Lindsay shared the story last night of being in Dublin at a bar, and she met this guy, and this guy said, "Oh, let's be Facebook friends." And they had one common friend, Daniel John. And he turns and he goes, "How do you know Daniel? How do you know Dan John?" He goes, "He's my dad." And that was it. Her and her friend didn't buy a drink the rest of the night because this whole group of weightlifting geeks came over and went, "Oh my God, oh my God." And so if you're ever in Dublin, it doesn't hurt to be my friend.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to pull the Dan John card every now and then. That's good advice. Okay, this one comes from gentle listener Todd. So Todd wants to know the following. He says, a good friend left a giant rope at my place. It is probably about 2 inches thick, like those battle ropes. It is definitely not easy. It is heavy and there are no handles, so it seems to challenge my shoulder and wrist mobility. I am curious if you guys think it is worth working into my workout routine. I think my friend deliberately forgot it, and I may have it for a while. It is tough. I am not sure which is worse, this darn jump rope or the slosh pipe I built. Thanks, Mr. John, he says. I am finally getting back into the swing of things after a short battle with COVID and too much time on the couch. Be well, and thanks again for all you guys do. Well, first off, Todd, glad to hear that you are recovering and that you're getting back in the swing of things. But yeah, Dan, what do we think about these giant ropes, the battle ropes?
Well, I have one in my backyard that I do, we rope climb with, and then we had a shorter one, and if I could find it, I would tell you more about it, that we use for jump roping, because someone told me that this was good for you, and I hated it. But yeah, if you look up John Brookfield's battling ropes, or just type in battling rope on YouTube, and I guarantee you'll have more ideas that you can ever use. And then another thing that is also a good idea, Todd, is hooking the rope to a sled or even just a plate, and then you what would you call this? Pull.
I just some things just don't have any names. It's just that
so
thing.
You hook a plate or a dumbbell to it, and by the way, it has to be on a lawn that you don't care about, or and then you just hand over hand pull it to you, and then run to the end of the rope again, hand over hand pull it to you. Strangely, people have told me it really helps their hinge position, because if you don't hinge appropriately, you die. So it becomes a lower body, upper body exercise. Hey, Todd, I think there's value to them. I don't do them much because it's not something I do, but hey, I think there's value to it. Okay.
Yeah, I like them. Just to give an idea for Todd, for some of my conditioning days, this was at the gym I go to, which I haven't been to since the whole pandemic, but would do a complex, would do a sled push, thanks to Dan John's recommendation, and then would slam those dumb darn ropes. And yeah, it was so for me, they fit really well into a conditioning routine. So I like them. I use them when they're around. So if it's around, why not? Yeah, go for it. Just like anything else, just know that it's a tool, and some tools are better for certain jobs than others.
That's right. People ask me why I don't do more of them. It's always me. The number one thing for me is, if I'm working in a huge group, how am I going to have all those ropes? And if they don't have ropes, so that's why I try to make my workouts that you can do them with rocks. That's just me. Or remote cans or anything.
Right. So it's not indispensable, but just because something isn't indispensable doesn't mean it's not useful.
Good point.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dan, what do we have going on this week at Dan John University? What have you been working on? What announcements do you have for us?
Yeah, well, I'm working on an article right now about doing, the complexes. I'm trying to make it something like my perfect fat loss routine or some nonsense like that,
I love it.
But I looked up a lot about glucophage or metformin. I looked up a whole bunch of stuff on coffee and stuff like that. What I'm trying to do is, the diabetes thing is, and I know I say the word wrong, so make fun of me, folks. That whole area is really getting out of control, and yet we have ways to deal with it. Now, what I'm trying to do is look at it and say, okay, here's how a strength coach can help you. Very interesting little small thing. Ever since I went to the Middle East and got that liver parasite, I've been pre-diabetic since 1985. Okay, with my fasting blood glucose as high as 121. My last blood test, it was 81, which is, that's 2/3 of what it used to be, right? Is that right? Yeah, 2/3. And obviously my doctor is extremely pleased by that. And he said, what are you doing? And that's he's also the doctor he's my former student. He also asked me, what am I doing years ago when I, in a 1 month period, lowered my blood cholesterol numbers way down. And so what I'm doing is what I'm going to share in this article. Lots of podcasts. The weather in Utah is insane. It snowed yesterday in the mountains. It's 50 degrees. It's downright cold, and this is late June in a desert. So, and between the road construction and the weather, I don't know. I think my brain is getting a little weak. Oh, one big thing, my friend. One big thing. You got time for one big thing?
I've got all the time in the world. Yep.
There's a new book coming out called Attempts, Essays in Health, Fitness, Longevity, and Easy Strength. The author we're in our last minutes of getting the text together, and the author has finished the audio. And so maybe by the first part in the next few weeks, there might be a new book available from that young author.
Well, how about that? Isn't that exciting news?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I told Larry, I go, I finished it. She goes, "You're writing a book?" I said, "Yeah, remember I told you I was."
You've got to be like the best author to have for a publisher, honestly.
Yeah, I'm done. And so I'm trying to do on this is, you know, I guess I should dedicate an entire book to just easy strength, but it would make no sense without the discussions of goal setting, health, some longevity discussions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just an easy strength book like we wrote back in 11 by itself just doesn't.
I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
And it was just too performance based. Whereas I'm discovering, yeah, it's probably the best thing a thrower can do, sure, but it's also good for everybody else. In the same way, you know, is fasting good for athletes? Yes. Is fasting? Yes. To me, easy strength, fasting, coffee, vegetables, sleep, water. These are just like those. Yeah, these are really good things.
No disagreement here. This is just the agreement cast, of course.
Yeah. Hello, welcome once again to Agree About Everything. So I wanted to mention that, and I should have probably started at the start because.
No, that's well, congratulations, because I know it's, once you've removed, your 1,000th, appendix, it's, you've removed your 1,000th appendix, but writing a book is never easy, even if it's your 20th book, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm dedicating it to my brother Phil, who died last year at this time, and of course to my friends who died that August day. But I'm actually, I don't read my own work,
You can't. You can never do it.
But I have to because of the audiobooks, and I'm going through it, and it's like, that's pretty good. There's some parts. It's really funny. You can see that my ability to, I wouldn't say my writing's gotten better, but my writing's gotten much better for the audiobook.
Yeah. Well, you're a great writer, Dan. And isn't that funny? Because same thing, I was dreading when they brought me out to the studio to do the audiobook for my last book. Cause I'm like you go back and you read anything you wrote a month ago, and you're just so ashamed and embarrassed that anything could write something so deficient, right? And then, but then I did the audiobook. I'm like, this isn't, there's some, right. You don't pat yourself on the back too much, but.
Is that your journalism book?
The green one. Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
You're right next to The Sword and the Stone and Fighting Back by Rocky Blyer. That's pretty good. And Training with Sarity. Oh, and look, Paleo Workouts for Dummies. The finest title, yes, Kafka's Motorcycle. If you guys know your
indeed,
Bridget Jones' Diary. Well, listen, brother, I love you, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Always a pleasure, Dan. Thank you. We'll see you then.
All right, brother. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.